perceive. And it is on the same ground, I think, that we can try to understand the safety versus freedom debate. If you have seen on in the international news media, in the US and in some other parts of the world, people are protesting against lockdown, and then and some placards they were carrying said, "I want myself freedom, sell my freedom for your safety. I won't sell my freedom for your safety." So, in comparison, I think in the Asian cultures, the stay at home was welcomed in a, I mean, cordial manner. At least majority of the people. So then my third point is that in the big picture, in the geopolitical level, the outbreak has brought two ideologies in contestation. On one side, we see proponents of global solidarity. One figure in the front line is the Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek, who even sees the situation as offering us a choice between barbarism and communism. He argues that at this point we have only two choices, that is either barbarism or the communism. So on the other side, we see the proponents of extreme nationalism. So in one side, we see the proponents of global solidarity. Without global solidarity, we can't face this global pandemic. But on the other hand, we see the strengthening and strengthening of extreme nationalism. These are the two confrontations we are seeing in the geopolitical level. However, although there are people who promote, who advocate global solidarity, the way things happening now gives us a picture, and we are perhaps on the doorstep of a war for global superpower. These are the three main points I wanted to talk about. If time permits, and if there are discussion session, I will talk more about the topic. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening me. And this is a privilege for me. As I said, I lived there in Assam for more than 3 years. I made many friends, and thank you very much for inviting me for this webinar, and thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Liyanage, for your very thought-provoking speech. You have talked about, in three aspects, you have talked about the biological, the geopolitical, the social changes that we are to face during after this COVID-19. As we have an interactive session towards the end of this webinar, so I think your presentation will be discussed in more detail there. So now, may I request Honorable Patricia Mukhim, ma'am, our another resource person, to present her deliberation. Ma'am, it's over to you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak about what you call now the new normal. I think the word new normal is a dichotomy, because something that is new cannot be normal, and something that is normal cannot be new. Now, I'd like to go to the origin of the word new normal. I think it originated in 2008 after the economic crisis that hit the globe. And people in business had to rethink ways of doing business. So they invented this word new normal, and we have all, sort of made this word our own. The new normal, which is the post-COVID world, which I don't know when we will arrive at, is actually a very scary world. It's a very daunting world, but it's also, it gives us an opportunity to be transformative. It can also be enlightening. It helps us to reassess our relationships. I'm not an academic, so I will not be philosophical, and I will not get into the philosophy of it. I will not get into the science of COVID. For me, it's a disease I am personally very scared of, and I know that there are many like me who fear this disease because it's so unknown. The virus is so unpredictable, and it's difficult to say how we get it and where we get it from. However, this new normal is an opportunity for us to imagine new ways of doing things. If we do not stop to think, if we didn't stop to think, if COVID didn't bring our life to a standstill, we would still be going about business as usual, destroying the environment. And I think COVID is one of the reasons for the environment fighting back. This is what I feel. Then, of course, we are looking at new habits that we have developed since the past 3 months, one of which is washing our hands. Now, washing our hands is not a new thing. The only new thing about washing our hands is that now we have become more conscious. We have become more aware that we need to wash our hands in a certain way and for those many seconds. And one of the new normal things is to be working from home. I'm a journalist. I'm the editor of a newspaper. I'm also at that age which people say, scientists and doctors say, is a vulnerable age when I'm asked not to step out too much. It's very difficult for a journalist to be working from home, but I still, once in a while, I do move out. I do go and look for stories. But there is, of course, the need for reducing physical distancing with people. So this working from home, how does it help? I think henceforth, many companies, many corporates have seen how well it works for people to be working from home. So it reduces the need for physical infrastructure. If you don't need physical infrastructure, you reduce the need, you reduce the cost for rent, you reduce the cost for urban space, you reduce also the manpower needed to maintain that space, the sweepers, the security personnel, and all that. However, what we have to be thinking about in the new normal is also how of people in this country and across the globe who have lost their jobs, how are they going to get back their jobs? I think job creation would be one of the most challenging things in the new normal for all governments across the world. There are different groups of people in this world, and I'm speaking from experiences here where I am, which is in Shillong, in Meghalaya, in the northeast of India. There are groups like the Shillong Chamber Choir, which is actually a choir that performs and sings for huge audiences across the country and in every part of the world. Now, what did they do post-COVID, or rather during the COVID, when they couldn't perform because of the, of the constraints? What they did was they reinvented themselves, and now they are becoming, they're carrying out a trade which is to deliver groceries and other items to homes. So home delivery now is becoming a new kind of job for a lot of young people. So this is what I mean by, by saying that it gives us an opportunity to rethink things. So these are new startups that are coming up. Then what we are doing now is we are having virtual meetings. This is the new normal, and henceforth, I don't know why organizers of any seminar would want to spend money on bringing participants to a particular place, paying for their hotel and all that, when we can do this just as well on, sitting from our. And Professor Darshana is in Sri Lanka. He still looks as if he's very near to us. So this is, I think, one good way of cutting expenses, unnecessary expenses. Then we spoke about online education, and there's been a lot of discussion about the urban bias that online education brings. Well, this is an opportunity to push for a better digital connect, to bridge the digital divide between the rural and the urban in all our South Asian countries. I don't know if the rest of the world faces the digital divide that we do. For instance, yesterday and day before, there was a person who was accused of some crime, which is a bailable crime, and he was trying to get bail, but the lawyers could not get online with the judge because the link had failed. So the person now has to be in jail until the 23rd. So this is how the digital world actually connives sometimes against us. Those in the private sector, for instance, have been most unfortunate. Many have lost their jobs. And need I say that even in the media, many people have lost their jobs. Many have been laid off during this time because the newspaper houses could not get enough revenue to pay their staff. So for most of us, COVID is a double whammy. For one, it's a disease. And secondly, we're losing our livelihoods. That's something to be thinking about. Then there are many journalists against whom FIRs have been filed just because they wrote some COVID stories that were not palatable to the powers that be, to the governments in different states. Some of them have been filed sedition cases. So it's also a very traumatic time for people in the media. However, let me not dwell too much on the media just because I'm a media person. The new normal will also need to see some attitudinal change in our behaviors, in our value systems, in how we view, like I said, how we view family relationships, how we view friendships. In these 3 months that we have been at home, how many people have actually called up to say, how are we doing? Very few have done that. And those few are the people that that perhaps are our real friends. Others do not remember to call up, either because they're too busy with their own lives or we were not really close to them. Then when we look at, for instance, the use of public transport, most of us would be very wary about getting into a taxi now. We would be fearing the next passenger because we don't really know who is a carrier, who is asymptomatic, who is a person who's symptomatic. Of course, you'll get to hear the person sneeze, the person cough. But the asymptomatic person is somebody we need to fear because that person doesn't show symptoms, but he or she is a carrier. So if we have to share public transport with such people, can we do it as we have done in the past? This is something I'm not very sure we can do. And the new normal is that when you cough or you sneeze, you feel very embarrassed, almost as if you're a carrier of some sort. I feel that many of us now are very cautious about coughing in public or even sneezing. But these are actually quite normal things for human beings, no? Then talking about entertainment, sports, and cinema, I don't know how long it'll take these to come up again. I don't know how many of us would want to go to the cinema hall when they do open, and where we have to be seated so far away from each other. If we go as a family, how will we really enjoy there? So these are some of the things that we need to be conscious of. And when you go to the shops these days, if you're going to a shoe shop, you find that right from the doorway, especially if you go to these Bata stores, people spray your hands with the sanitizer. Then they ask you to write your name on a register, your name, your address, your phone number, because they want to do contact tracing in case there is an outbreak. So this is not something that was normal. This is a new normal again. Even policing, the very idea of policing has changed. Now police are trying to arrest people for different things, not for criminal activities per se, but for not wearing masks, for breaking curfew laws, for not socially distancing intentionally, and all that. All the time you see policemen dealing with this, dealing with people who drive around without a curfew pass. And sometimes you wonder why there is a curfew in the first place. And are we humans so diffident, so aggressive, so belligerent that we cannot obey laws, that a curfew has to be imposed? Now with this COVID, our travels have been large, but those who have traveled have said that the airport protocols have become so very stringent that you have to see to believe it. So I think up to the end of this year, perhaps very few people would really want to travel anywhere, because according to some people, airports where you're most likely to catch the virus. There's too many movements. In fact, wherever there are too many movements, that's the place for the transmission of the virus. That's what we've seen in Bombay. That's what we've seen in Delhi. That's what we've seen in New York, for instance. So, yeah, and then let me come to some of the opportunities that this COVID has presented, one of which is the emergence of new opportunities in, for instance, in markets. In Meghalaya, we've seen that a lot of markets have come up away from that main market that used to be called Bara Bazaar in Yodo. So there are many farmers markets that have come up. And I think in a sense, this is very good for farmers. They don't have to come all the way to Shillong. They don't have to rely on middlemen. So if COVID does away with the middleman syndrome, because the middleman is the one that makes all the money from the farmers, then I think this is one good omen. How do we individually or as groups emerge out of this COVID-19 scenario? How do we step into that new normal world? I think that requires a lot of reflection, introspection, self-analysis, which we need to do. And we have a lot of time. I think many of us do have enough time now to do that introspection because we are working from home. I know that university and college teachers do not have that much time because you have to prepare your lessons, and it's not easy to prepare online lessons. But I think it still gives you a lot of time to be with family. Although one has heard of so many psychological traumas, when a person who goes out to work in the morning and comes home only in the evening, is at home the whole day, there's a kind of a domestic crisis as well. So people are learning to live with that. People are learning to cope better. There are many people who've learned many new skills during this COVID period. Some people have learned a lot of cooking, baking, and all that. I'm speaking from the perspective of a woman. And I know that there are many men as well who've learned to help around in the house. I think these are new lessons to be learned and to be imbibed. I think that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
So thank you very much, ma'am, for your wonderful and thought-provoking speech. We are really overwhelmed and enraged. Now we have an interactive session, and our two of the very esteemed resource persons has deliberated wonderfully and has raised so many pertinent issues. So I would like to request all the participants to participate in this interactive session. And I request my colleague, Dr. Birender Pal, kindly to moderate this session. Dr. Pal, please, it's over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And it's a great privilege, and it's a proud moment that both of our resource person has given a very detailed situation regarding this COVID-19. And I'd like to request all our participants, please write your questions in the chat box. We will directly try to connect with our resource persons. If you have any questions. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, there is a question.
Yeah, I can see this.
Yes.
I can see this question, whether it will change women's engagement with the cities.
Right.
It has been very, very hard for women migrant workers, this, especially that there are so many poignant incidents. One of a person who on the way, the other one of a woman who tied her child to the suitcase and was pulling that suitcase for miles together. These women will think 100 times before they decide to go back to those cities where they came from. And that's why it becomes even more challenging now for all the states to be thinking of generating employment internally. I don't know how long it will take and whether anyone can go back to that old normal of leaving their villages and going to other cities and then facing a situation where people just other them. People don't accept them anymore as their employees. We know that there are many who have also or died of suicide because of the psychological trauma caused by the pandemic. There have been celebrities, we don't know whether they died of suicide because of the pandemic. I would like to link the two because the pandemic leaves you without any job and there's a sense of great helplessness. And if you don't have support, if you don't have psychological and mental support, then it becomes even more, traumatic to handle. And if you're alone at that time, it's even more dangerous, for the person.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. There is a question, ma'am. Please explain how the new life will be after COVID.
I think I've said that life cannot be the same again. We are learning every day how to cope with life as it presents to us day after day. We are learning to distance ourselves from others in a very decent sort of way. When we say social distancing, I think it's a wrong word. I think physical distancing is a better word. Social distancing means that you distance yourself socially from your society. It's more of a mental thing. So I would not like to be socially distanced from my society, from my neighborhood. I will maintain physical distance for the good of everyone. So, because in India, we also have the caste hierarchy, and this should not give, a new opportunity to strengthen that caste hierarchy, to sort of exacerbate that caste hierarchy that we experience all the time.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, there are some another questions. Ma'am, are you agree that lockdown is essential for future global normalcy?
Well, there are two ways of looking at this. Maybe at some point, the lockdown was necessary, if only to tell us how serious the situation is. But having locked ourselves down for almost 2 months, we have no alternative now but to unlock ourselves. And we are unlocking gradually with all the precautions that we need to take. Whether that will help or it will just sort of exacerbate the situation, we don't know. looking at what's happening in Delhi, for instance, the daily rise in the number of infections, it makes you wonder whether the unlocking has done it, or what is it that has caused this great, the great spiral in the number of infections.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Again, ma'am, last question we will take. Ma'am, give some suggestions. How will you teach our students in the classroom after this pandemic? Because we can't treat them like before we used to. So is there any technique so that we can handle the students?
I've been out of the teaching line for a very long time. I left my teaching job in 2000. So I'm really not, but I think, see, now because you have technology, there are so many ways in which students can reach out to you at the personal level. Of course, you have to give them a time and a space. It cannot be that you can attend to them 24/7. They see, the point is that students now can learn a lot online. What they need the teachers for, mentor them, just to sort of explain things they don't understand, because a lot of the things are self-explanatory now. If you just go to the internet, there's so much of knowledge out there. How they imbibe this knowledge, and how they turn that information into something they can deal with, something that gives them the life skills and their social skills, which are two most important skills that many of our students don't have. I think that is what is needed the most, because much of the knowledge is available on the internet. It's the personal relationship, that they value.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Ma'am, again, one question. How this pandemic affects the psychology of the young generation? Please throw some light, ma'am.
It affects because, young people, they like to, they always seen with each other. They have their peer group, they talk, they laugh, they're not used to the social distancing. It is the social distancing that is actually killing them. See, even for us, the fact that as a parent or as a grandparent, you can't hug your grandchildren, or you can't hug your children anymore, although we are not, as the professor said, such a hugging society, but you still want to hug your little children, grandchildren, and you can't do it. I think it has some kind of effect. And whatever you may say, the sense of touch is a very human thing. Touch and the sense of being there with somebody very close, that itself is a lot of psychological succor that we are missing now, and young people particularly miss that. Imagine two young lovers not being able to see each other for so many months, or maybe just talking over telephone. I mean, these are real things, so I hope nobody minds if I speak about that.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And we'll take some more questions after some time. I would like to move to Dr. Liyanage, sir. So there are some questions. Sir, number one is that how Sri Lanka successfully curtailed the corona pandemic?
Actually, it was like, as it has been reported in the news media, they have already identified the clusters. All the patients are coming from only from these clusters. So it has not gone to the level of community spread. So they could, from the beginning, they could control those clusters. There were few clusters identified, and some places were locked down. And as might be, you also know that most of the cases are now coming from Sri Lankan Navy and soldiers. So I think this is the reason they could identify those clusters from the beginning. So they could prevent spreading it outside the clusters.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sir, there is another question. Now, how the multiculturalism in the context of new normal life will be?
Yeah, that is what I emphasized in my talk also. This is like, that I found it on social media. I mean, from in India also, and here also it was like that. People were busy, and it was the easy way to scapegoating a particular community. I don't want to name the community, but it happened, and some tensions. I mean, between communities regarding this scapegoating. But I think that didn't go to the extent of clashes, and still still the situation is controlled when regarding the clashes among the communities. But it is like that in the ideological level, in social media, there are some kind of accusations going on.
Okay, thank you, sir. Then there is another question to you. Sir, where do you locate the research work in the normal, especially looking at the challenges we face as a research scholars?
Yeah, I think this has like in that silver line in dark cloud. There are many research topics coming out from this difficult situation, ranging from the new normal itself, as Ma'am Patricia said, the ways we deal with this technology. And there are already discussions about this intrusion of technology into our body and brain, detecting our that is biopolitics and things like that. All these are coming out. So I think although we are in a difficult situation, there are some new opportunities coming out from this difficult situation.
Yeah, can I say something? There are already research scholars who are doing research on the eating of young people during this COVID, or the study has